So welcome to lecture 10. So in this case, today we're going to look at essentially at the final part of motor in Asia, or basically what we're going to do is motivated by the final part of motor in Asia. Because last time, of course, we looked at this particular model and the analysis, theoretical analysis basically of this model by motor in Asia, but in the last part of the paper they try to connect the model to reality. So connecting to reality means putting values to these particular parameters that are used in this paper and seeing what the implication is for what are the particular thresholds that we are computing if we put in realistic values. So this exercise, if you wish, of putting in realistic values, that's typically called calibration. So we're going to calibrate the model. Motor and Asia are calibrating this model in there. So you can have a look, of course, at the paper at what choices they make, so how they choose their investment costs, how they choose units actually that they are going to use for measuring these price thresholds, and you'll have to do that actually. So what we'll do in this lecture is basically to review certain units and also have an idea of what are the sort of typical sizes of these different units for different kinds of production units for electricity. So what motor in Asia need to do in order to calibrate their model is they need estimates of these market prices, and they also need estimates of costs. So they need to know something about electricity prices, because if you remember this, in the parameter A in their model basically measures electricity prices. You have to make sure that you understand how do you measure actually electricity prices, and how do you convert electricity prices from one type of unit to a different type of unit, because we sometimes have to compare them to other stuff which is might be quoted in different units. So likewise, we need to know something about what gas prices are, how are they quoted in reality, and what will be typical gas prices, and how what units are they described in. And we have to know a little bit about measuring investment costs and relating those to capacities and production of power plants. So starting with electricity prices, let's first deal with the units here. So the standard unit in which electricity is measured is an amount of energy, and this unit that we typically use in the electricity world is the megawatt hour, or MWH, or this H is a small letter if you can see that. So what is a megawatt hour? Well, 1 megawatt hour is actually 1,000 kilowatt hours, so it's more familiar. Kilowatt hour might be more familiar from your electricity meter at your home, perhaps. And it's on the other hand, a megawatt hour is 1,000th of a gigawatt hour. So mega basically means a million, and a watt hour is actually a unit of energy. So how large is a megawatt hour? Well, we can compare it to things that we know. So for instance, a typical household would use more or less of the order of 3 megawatt hours per year. All Dutch households together, so there's approximately, I guess, more or less 7 million households in the Netherlands, together they consume something in the order of 20,000 gigawatt hours each year. So that's total energy, electrical energy consumption, electricity consumption for all households in the Netherlands. We also might want to compare this to total Dutch electricity consumption. Well, that happens to be in more of the order of 100,000 gigawatt hours per year, so there's still quite a big gap between these 20,000 and 100,000. So what's in that gap? Well, it's of course all industrial and business use. So actually households make up only a fairly small portion essentially of total electricity consumption in a country, in particular also in the Netherlands. So a large portion would be the electricity consumption, say, by big industrial users like those that use electricity to produce aluminum, for instance. So those are typically big users. And of course the small business also altogether will use a significant fraction of total electricity consumption. So this is a typical annual usage of electricity in terms of megawatt hours or gigawatt hours for different within the Netherlands actually. So what do we measure prices for electricity? And well, in terms of euros, of course, euros per this megawatt hour. So we just have to figure out, you know, how much does using 1 megawatt hour, how much does it cost? And typical prices, well, these are prices from a couple of years ago, 2018. So what you see here is a whole list of prices, because it's going to depend, as you know, when you're actually using electricity. So these prices are from a date in August, as you can see. So here you can see actually this whole range of future times viewed from this point of the 3rd of August in this particular year. So the first month would be the first month ahead. So if you're in August, the first month ahead would of course be September. So what this says is, if you want to buy a contract for consuming electricity all hours of the day during the whole of September, then on average you would pay 55 euros for each megawatt hour that you would consume under that contract if you buy it at that moment. Second month would be then the next month, October. Third month thereafter. First quarter is the first quarter or ahead, so that first full quarter that remains in that year would then be the October to December quarter. Second quarter would then be the first quarter of the year thereafter, so January to March essentially. And again, these are prices. First year, second year, so likewise. So what are these prices? They're prices for baseload. So it says base here. So these are baseload prices. So baseload basically means electricity which you consume in an equal amount spread equally over all hours of the day. So typically, if you're a big industrial user which runs its factory 24 hours per day, this is what's going to matter most for you. If you mostly consume your electricity during daytime hours, then electricity is a little bit more expensive, and those are called the peak hours. So in the Netherlands, peak hours are defined to be the hours between 8 in the morning and 8 in the evening. So if you only want to use to buy electricity in those hours, the price per megawatt hour is going to be a little bit more expensive, and these are the sort of corresponding prices that you saw in August 2018. So those are the prices at that particular point in time. So also, if you look now at prices, it will be different numbers, of course, but again, you will see this whole range of prices depending on when you're consuming electricity, and also whether you're consuming them as baseload or as peak load consumption. So that's electricity prices in the Netherlands. So these are the future prices. So these futures are actually traded at the index exchange. So that's just an exchange at which you can buy and sell these products, these futures products, and these were the market prices at that particular point in time. So how did at that point in time the prices across Europe compare? So here we had the day ahead actually price, so the price for consuming electricity in all hours tomorrow rather than next month. So these are day ahead prices. So in this particular day, actually the Dutch exchange price for day ahead consumption was 51.70 euros per megawatt hour. And we can compare this to different countries. So if you look at the nearby countries, actually the prices are pretty comparable. So in some countries actually you see larger deviations. So Great Britain and Spain have sort of slightly larger prices. And the reason why these prices are not arbitraged away, so not made equal by trade, is because there's only limited capacity for transporting electricity from one country to the next. So on land, typically most of these interconnections, as they are called, so the connections, the electrical connections between countries are fairly strong, some particularly in this region over here. But across the Pyrenees, actually, there's limited capacity to trade. So that means, or in this case, that had as a result that there persisted a fairly high price difference between France and Spain, and also, of course, Great Britain also depends for transporting electricity from the continent to Britain, depends on these cross-border links, which are actually cables under the sea. And there's just a limited, it's pretty expensive to build those, obviously, so there's just a limited capacity of those, which again enables some price differentials to persist actually on various days. So this is so a European view of that market, the day-ahead market in this case, and again measured all in euros per megawatt hour. So how is electricity actually produced? Well, of quite different ways to produce electricity. I mean, you've seen a lot of that actually already in the first lecture, but here's again a picture for how it works and how it's made up of, what electricity is made out of, essentially what kind of fuels are used in the Netherlands. So you see a large fraction of electrical capacity is gas-fired plants, so this light blue part, actually 20 gigawatt hours out of 28 in 2012, it's a bit older data, was made up of gas-fired plants, and some smaller amounts here. This darker blue is actually coal-fired plants, still a large fraction there, and this slightly smaller fraction at that point in time was renewable electricity supply, so including wind and solar power. So this left-hand pie diagram measures the total capacity that's available. So that's quite slightly different from the total actual production that is made, because just to give an example, if the wind is not blowing, as you all know, there will be less wind capacity that's going to be used. So there might be differences here. So a large proportion, of course, of electricity produced is gas-fired. Slightly larger compared to capacity, because these plants are running more hours per day than the coal-fired plants, because they have lower marginal costs, as you know, at that point in time in particular. So this would be over here, and here we have actually renewable production, which is again made up of out of wind and solar. So we talked already a little bit about capacity. So I talked about the energy first, which was measured in megawatt hours. But in order to produce these megawatt hours, you need a plant which has a capacity which is measured in megawatts. And what's a megawatt? Well, a 1 megawatt generator is a generator which can produce exactly 1 megawatt hour in each hour. So it's 1 megawatt hour per hour, if you wish. That's the capacity. So you divide out this hour. So the H here stands for hour. So a typical plant actually is not is a bit larger than a 1 megawatt size. So a typical gas-fired generator would be of the order of hundreds to above 1,000 megawatts, and coal-fired plants are still slightly bit larger than that. So these are typical gas and coal-fired large generation plants. Total capacity in the Netherlands, circa 30,000 megawatts. So of course depends a bit when you measure this. So that's the production capacity for electricity in the Netherlands. And so here's a picture actually of a gas-fired, one of these big gas-fired generators. So this is the one in Eemshaven, which is not too far from Groningen. So you see you actually also see a windmill here. So it's actually two types of electricity that you can see in this picture. So in order to use such a gas-fired plant to produce electricity, of course, you have to buy the gas, as we know. So you have to buy the input, the fuel. So also this fuel has a price curve, so different prices depending on for which day you buy the gas. So here you see the gas price curve, as it's called. So these are the assessments on the Dutch platform TTF, on which gas is actually traded. So you see here day-ahead prices. So if you want to buy gas for tomorrow, that will be day-ahead. So you have prices for different future months. So this would be for August. For different quarters ahead, so this would be the fourth quarter of 2018, this would be the first quarter of 2020, winter and summer, of course, combinations of quarters in different years, so the years 18, 19, 20, 21, and we also have calendar years, and actually also a gas year, which is a slightly shifted version of a calendar year. How do we quote the gas price? Again, on the continent, often in terms of euros per megawatt hour, so similar to electricity, so euros per some the energy content of this gas that you are buying. So particularly, of course, this energy content depends on, is again related to the volume of gas. So if you buy 1 cubic meter, this will have a certain amount of energy if you burn it, and it depends on what kind of gas, actually how large that amount of energy is. So if you look closely, you see a high calorific gas. That means a type of gas which is in a higher range of energy content per cubic meter. So this is our euros per megawatt hour. So if you're in different countries, of course, often prices are quoted differently. So here you see pence per therm. So pence, of course, is the British currency unit, well, part of a pound, if you wish. The therms are also a British amount of energy. So it's a different unit. You can, of course, if you want to figure that out, you can figure out what a therm is in terms of megawatt hours. And likewise, if you're in the United States, of course, dollars, and this other thing is millions of British thermal units. So again, that's a different energy unit that people use mostly in the US. And of course, you should be, well, in the end, if you trade in this business, you want to be able to actually convert these different units into each other, which will depend on the currency exchange rate and also on this conversion rate between megawatt hours and British thermal units. Okay, so this is the gas prices, gas price curve. So if you know the gas price and the electricity price, you know what you're going to earn if you burn gas in order to produce electricity, and that's what this is. So what you see here is actually these purple and these orange lines, they are actually spark spreads. So what is spark? So you can see it here, spark 50% and spark 45%. What a spark spread is, well, a spread obviously is the difference between what you get, electricity price, versus what it costs you, which is the gas price that you have to pay. That's the spread. The spark spread is defined to be the spread for burning gas, indeed. Apart from spark spread, people in the industry also use the word dark spread, which is the spread that you earn if instead of burning gas, you actually use coal as your fuel. So dark spread is what you get per megawatt hour if you burn coal rather than gas to produce electricity. And all of this actually is in the UK. So this is how this spark spread and this dark spread actually evolved over time in the UK. You see these two different spark spreads relating to these, I'll get to this in a little bit, but relating to plants which might have different efficiency of converting gas into electricity. So depending on the efficiency of your plant, of course, you need more or less gas to actually produce the same amount of electricity. So that means these spreads will also be different for you. And finally, one final word here, clean. I didn't explain that yet. So clean means taking into account the price of CO2. So clean means including the price of the permits that you need to produce this amount of CO2 permits, basically that you need to produce this amount of CO2 by burning your gas or coal. So this is corrected basically for the CO2 prices at those moments. So let's then look at all the information basically that we need to talk about the revenues for a gas-fired plant, in particular the marginal revenues. So it will be per megawatt hour. So what will be your revenues per megawatt hour? What's of course the price for electricity that you get per megawatt hour, that's clear, but then how much gas are you going to use? Well, again, that depends on the efficiency of your plant. So particularly if you have a 50% efficiency, that will mean you will need 2 megawatt hours of gas, energy in gas, to burn those. That will allow you to produce 1 megawatt hour of electricity. So the rest basically gets away as heat. So hot water basically that you have to get rid of somehow. So 50% means half of your gas is essentially converted into heat, and the other half is converted into electricity. And if it's only 45%, then it's a large share of heat, and a smaller share, only 45% share, will be converted into usable electricity. So the actual revenues for this 50% efficiency plant per megawatt hour of electricity that you produce, which will be the relevant thing, is price of electricity per megawatt hour minus, in this case, twice the price of the gas per megawatt hour, because we need 2 megawatt hours of gas to produce this 1 megawatt hour of electricity. So how much will then your revenue be per year? Because that's also what you will use, or what Mortonese use. How much does this gas-fired plant earn per year? Well, of course, it depends on how big is your plant, so how many megawatt hours, what's your capacity. But also depends on what's your utilization. So how many hours will this plant run? So if it's going to run all the hours of the year, then you have a lot of hours in which to make a margin, whereas if you only run it a couple of hours per year, you have only low revenues, of course. So one way of looking at this might be, one example of this is if you have a 1000 megawatt gas plant, a capacity 1000 megawatts, which runs only during peak hours, which would be more or less 5,000 hours in the year, out of the total of 8,760 hours that are there in any regular year, except for leap years, obviously. So this would mean you would be producing a capacity of 1,000 megawatts for 5,000 hours. That will make you 5 million megawatt hours of electricity per year. So for each of these megawatt hours, you might earn this spread essentially in terms of revenues across the year. So that's basically it. So this type of information that Motornase also use in this calibration exercise, and they actually use it to convert different units that they read off from newspapers or that they have industry information on. And then, of course, the relevant thing is to make sure that the different units that you use for these different parameters, that they match up. So there's a little bit of conversion that needs to be done, which you will have to do if you want to verify those numbers, and so you will actually need to be able to rework capacities into say euros, if you wish, by using electricity or gas prices. So that's it for today, and I wish you good luck with doing the exercise, and we'll continue next week with an extension of actually the real option analysis, and where we'll actually have a look at what happens if you have additional real options, particular real options of extending a power plant from a base capacity to some larger capacity.